Welcome to all of you. Welcome to the plan participant webinar, the first of what we expect to be a series of them on some basic legal topics that can help you out, and some ways in which the plan can help you out. My name is Fred Miller, as Peter said. I have supervised plan consumer cases for many years. I've also been a teacher, an adjunct professor teaching consumer law at Cooley Law School and the Institute for Continuing Legal Education here in Michigan. I say that because consumer law is our topic today. In particular, two aspects of consumer law, two sets of rights that you have under federal consumer law that you can use and that we encourage you to use, and that the plan, your legal services plan, can help you effectively use. That is the rights involving credit reports and credit billing. Credit reports are the ways that your creditors, when you're seeking credit, can figure out whether they're going to grant you credit. A new credit card, a mortgage, an installment loan, an installment sale. They're all going to be looking at your credit report. Credit card statements, of course, are what you get in the mail or online every month. Lists all the items that you bought using a credit card, what you've paid on any outstanding amount from the last credit card statement, any borrowing you've done using your credit card. Each of those things has a set of rights around them under federal law. The Fair Credit Reporting Act on the one hand, the Fair Credit Billing Act on the other. And both of them can be used to correct errors, and there will be errors. Not in every credit report, certainly, and not always on your credit card statement, but eventually you'll run into something. And it's very important that you understand and utilize the rights that are available to you. We're going to start with credit reports. Credit reports are important. Credit grantors use reports for all kinds of things. You want a mortgage, you want to refinance your mortgage. You want a new credit card, you want to raise your credit card limit. You want a loan from your credit union, you want to buy an appliance on installments or a car. All of these things are going to result in a credit report being used by the prospective creditor to figure out whether to sell or loan to you, at what interest rate, under what terms. If you have accounts, those same creditors are going to use reports to review them. If you're delinquent, they're going to use reports to help them collect on accounts. And specialized credit reports using some of the same information and additional in particular areas involved are used for hiring, renting, decisions on insurance. So accurate credit reports are important to you. Mistakes are something you want to be able to catch. So on credit reports, we're going to get to credit card later on. We're going to get credit card statements. First thing we're dealing with is credit reports. What are the rights you get under federal law? First of all, you get a right to obtain your credit report, a free one each year from each agency that prepares a credit report. There are three main national credit reporting agencies, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. There are other ones that come in, specialized ones for like landlord reporting, and there are agencies that combine the information from the three main agencies and sell you that, or sell a creditor a combined report. But the three main agencies, and where you're mostly going to be interested in what they're saying about you, are TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Now, in addition to the right to get a free report from each of these agencies once a year, you also have the right to notice if one of these reports is used against you. Essentially, you go in, you want to buy a car, they say, you know, the best interest rate is this, but when they pull your credit report, they say, well, we're going to give you, instead of the 3.9, we're going to give you 7.9 because of your credit report. If they do that, or they deny you credit altogether, they have to tell you, give you a notice that says that was because of information in the credit report from TransUnion. Then that triggers an additional right to a free credit report. Even if you've gotten a TransUnion report in the last year, you can get another one. The idea being to check and see what it is that actually was there and caused you this problem. You have the right to contest and dispute items and reports, and if you do, you have the right then to an investigation. The credit reporting agency is obliged to conduct an investigation, a reasonable investigation, to see whether that item on your report is correct or not. And if they're not, if it's not correct, they have to revise it or take it off. Plus, if items are too old, and I'll tell you about how that works, they have to be removed from your credit report. I'll tell you what the ages are in a minute. Okay, what's the problem if you have errors? There are errors. The studies I've seen suggest that there are significant errors in at least 15 to 20% of credit reports. That's a lot. And over, the life of your credit report, there's a good chance that there will be errors. The problem tends to be if you don't find out about that until you're denied credit or given credit on worse terms because of the credit report, it's going to take you some time to fix it. There are time limits. They have to do an investigation. It has to proceed, but it may take some time, and you may lose the credit you want. And therefore, what we're recommending is that you be proactive, that you get your credit reports once a year, check them, look them over, work with us to make sure that they're accurate, and that anything that's negative that can be removed or altered is. All right, let's take a look first at what's in a credit report. First thing is it's going to have some personal information about you. Something to look at. Prior addresses, employment. Errors here may suggest that they're mixing you up with somebody else. Happens a lot, particularly with people who have common names, and it can have a devastating impact on your credit. Something to watch for. You want to correct it, even if the rest of your report is fine. You want to correct it because, like I say, they may be mixing you up, and it may have consequences down the line. Public records. Your report will have court judgments against you, if there are any, tax liens, bankruptcy if it's within the period to report bankruptcies in your history, perhaps a foreclosure if you were unlucky enough to have that happen to you at some point. Accounts. There are going to be the positive accounts and, if any, the negative accounts. Accounts in good standing improve your credit standing. They improve your credit score. We're not going to talk a lot about credit scores, but generally what a credit score is a way of compiling all this information in your credit report and giving it a number, making it easy for creditors to make decisions. And I'll talk a little bit about improving credit scores, what goes into them, but in a few minutes. Accounts in good standing, those that are paid as agreed, as this one is from GMAC, they improve your credit score. And they will generally have a couple of years of payments set out after at the bottom of each account, something that you can review if there are any negatives. And here's a negative account. This account, Collection Recovery Services, is with a collection agency or perhaps what we call a debt buyer. The original creditor you see is Sears Roebuck. There was a balance that, according to this report, was not paid off on time. Eventually, it was paid off, 2014, but it was delinquent, and that's why it's a negative account that went to a collection agency or a debt buyer for collection and shows up as a negative. It's not as negative as it might be because it was in fact paid and no longer and closed at that point, but it is and stands as a negative for the time being. Finally, there are two types of credit inquiries that will show up on your report. What they call hard inquiries and soft inquiries. These are a list of creditors or potential creditors who have used information from your credit file. It's important to review this. What we call the hard pulls or hard inquiries will be ones that are available and will show up on the credit report that goes to creditors. The soft ones will only show up on yours. What's the difference? Well, the hard inquiries are potential creditors who you are asking or have asked for credit from. If you went in to buy a car, you reached a deal, you went in to talk about the terms of a credit arrangement, an installment contract for this car, they would be pulling your credit report, and that would be what's called a hard pull, or what's labeled here as a regular inquiry. Those will be available to other creditors, and if there are lots of them, particularly if there are lots of them in a short period of time, that may have an effect on your credit worthiness. Otherwise, it's just something to look at and make sure that these are actually people who, companies that you actually have considered getting credit, applied for a loan, applied for credit with. You may not have ended up taking it, but if you applied for it, it will be under this. If there are items there that you never did apply for, that's important too, because it may indicate that someone else is trying to make use of your credit, and it's something that you may have to take some steps on. The other two kinds of inquiries, promotional inquiries, are ones that get very little information about you. You haven't gone to them. They result in those letters in the mail that say that you have been pre-approved. You actually haven't been. You show up on a list that credit reporting agency provided, the people with some very general factors that they were looking for, and that's all. They don't have your credit report, they don't have much information, and the fact that they pulled this, a soft pull, will not show up on your credit report. The third kind of inquiries is account reviews by creditors you're already involved with. That also will not show up on your credit report going out to prospective creditors. I mentioned that items can't stay on forever, though some of them may seem to. And I thought I'd run down what that means. For most things, that means 7 years. So what triggers the 7 years and when it ends varies. So accounts that go delinquent, that is, that you stopped paying on, didn't pay when they were due, and didn't start up again, those may be reported for 7 years after the delinquency, except that the delinquency is really not, doesn't begin for that purpose until 180 days have passed from you stopping payment. So it's really 7.5 years. The sale of that debt to another party, which often happens, of course, with the collection process that goes on now, doesn't change that. So, and watch it, because sometimes debt buyers will try to keep these things on for longer. Tax liens, 7 years after payment. So they may be on there for a long time, or it becomes, the lien becomes ineffective. Judgments, 7 years after the entry of the judgment, or the running of the limitation period on enforcement of the judgment. Well, that could be a long time. Michigan, judgment's good for 10 years, can be renewed for another 10. I mean, so judgment can be on your credit report for a long time. Bankruptcy is 10 years from filing. Criminal convictions can be on there forever, unfortunately. Okay, so how do you go about reviewing your credit report? You can do it with us, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. We suggest, maybe if you have never looked at your credit reports, it's a good idea to get all three of them at the same time and really go over the whole thing. After that, or if you've done it before with, over time, one way that people suggest, and you're being really conscientious, is that you get one every 4 months from the three main credit reporting agencies. So you're spacing it out during the year and evaluating the information all the time, essentially having a good constant review of what's going on. And as I said, there are two other reasons you can get free reports, and you should keep that in mind if any of those situations come up. Now, if you're working with us, and we certainly suggest that's a good idea, on credit reporting issues, here's a few things to say. Well, whether you're working with us or not, the website to use for information, for forms, for direct contact, to get your credit report for free is annualcreditreport.com. Not freecreditreport.com, but annualcreditreport.com. This is the website set up under the Fair Credit Reporting Law for free credit reports. And other websites, you may be able to get free credit reports, but they will try to sell you something, credit monitoring, if not the report itself, other kinds of services. And you may not be getting the report directly from the three main credit reporting agencies, which will give you then the rights to the information and the rights to dispute those central credit reports. If you want to work with us, call us. Numbers on the screen, 1-800-482-7700. I think you've all called in to join this initially. So you know us. We do these regularly as a matter of course. You work with a plan attorney and a plan paralegal specialist in credit reporting. Get your report, review it, correct it, dispute it. The way we do it, in general, if you haven't already gotten a report for yourself, is to make the request on a three-way telephone call with you and the automated service set up by annualcreditreport.com. That allows you to make the request directly. It's more cumbersome if we do it for you by mail or otherwise. And it works quickly. We don't have to worry about the mailing in or working through it in another way. And the report will come to you, which you will need to share with us by email or by mail. You can also get your own report on the website or by mail. So, I'm going to start with what you can't do, and then we'll talk about what correcting reports really mean. The reason I'm doing this is because one piece of information I want you to keep in mind is that there are a lot of people promising things about credit reports that they can't deliver and charging people to try to do it for them. So beware of people who promise things that go beyond what the law allows. Promise things like creating a new identity for you. Their promises may lead you in the wrong direction, and they're certainly going to charge for them. Your money is better spent reducing any debts you have, bringing accounts up to date if that's necessary, than spending it on credit repair that isn't real assistance to you at all. But what can you do? You can dispute any item or any piece of information on your report, and what happens that will trigger the responsibility of the credit reporting agency to reinvestigate that item without charge to you. What should you dispute? Any item that you know is wrong, that's for sure. Any item that you believe in is wrong. An amount, even if you know that an account is yours, if the amount doesn't make sense to you, you should dispute it. Certainly any debt, any account that you do not recognize as yours. Now, I'm not saying these are going to go away, but they will be investigated. It may give you more information that will ultimately make you understand or that this was your account. Maybe not. But if you have that kind of question, it's one you should dispute.
And Fred, I've got a question. This is Peter Miles. Any item you know is wrong. So if I receive my credit report and it has something like an incorrect address, is that something that you would still advise to dispute?
Yes, yes, you should correct anything. As I said earlier, it might be an indication that somebody else is trying to use your credit. Set up, for instance, a credit card in your name with a different address so you would never get the credit card statement and not be clued in that this is happening. So any incorrect personal information, incorrect judgments, incorrect accounts, all of this should be corrected, and this is your opportunity to do it. So you're going to review your report carefully, walk through it. You can do that with our credit reporting specialist, and describe and find accounts that you don't recognize, accounts that are listed multiple times. Sometimes that's okay because it's clearly the same account, same numbers being used. It's merely been sold from one to the next, and it's not going to confuse anybody. If it's at all confusing, it should be disputed because it may have an effect on your credit that it shouldn't. Public records that do not appear to be yours, judgments, tax liens, bankruptcy, accounts that were discharged in bankruptcy or that you paid off that don't have that information listed. So they appear to be active live debts. Old debts that may be too old, particularly debts that have been sold more than once and have a debt buyer's name on them. Inquiries, hard ones, those are the ones that are going to could affect your credit if there are too many of them. Applications for credit where you did not apply. You did not apply for credit. Maybe you went, and this happens, there are some unscrupulous car dealers, for instance, who will put in an application for a credit report the minute you give them your driver's license to take a test drive. Why? They want a leg up knowing stuff about you when negotiating price terms. You may never want to buy that car, and certainly you have not applied for credit. Should not be a pull on your credit report. Sometimes there is. These are things to dispute. Once you have reviewed that with our paralegal specialist, then we're identifying the errors with you, identifying where items that you do not recognize or think are in error. Then the question is, do we have anything further to send to the credit reporting agency? If there is any documents or information that would help them out and help you out in getting this corrected, we need to have them. Why? Because the scope of the inquiry, the investigation, depends in part on what information we give them. And if you have a copy of, for instance, the paperwork showing that you paid a judgment, and that's not shown in your credit report, the judgment is, but the fact that it's been paid isn't. We need to have a copy of that if you can find it. And you should be looking for these things because the chances of getting things corrected is much greater if we have that kind of document. What will we do with those things? Well, the credit reporting specialist at the plan will put them together, provide them to the plan attorney who you talked to originally in the case, who's going to review all the errors, create a dispute letter for you, and send it off to the credit reporting agency to trigger the investigation that's the centerpiece of the legal process here. The agency has to send a letter acknowledging that they've got your dispute, and they have to immediately pass that dispute on to the particular creditor if it's a creditor's account. If it's a judgment, they have to do their own investigation. Go back to the records and determine what's right and what's wrong. The creditors who have an account listed that is disputed have to conduct their investigation and report back to the agency, and all this has to be done within a 45-day period. At the end of 45 days, the agency has to get back to you, either verifying that information is correct, correcting an error if there is one, or if they can't determine one or the other, they have to delete the item. The agency has to notify you of the results of its investigation. If they do make changes, dropping an item or changing it to indicate that you made payments that didn't show up, that you paid off a judgment that hadn't been designated as that in the report, they have to give you a revised report. If an item is not changed, you have the right to submit a statement of dispute, and you can work with your plan attorney to do that. I'm not saying they have a big effect, but I think it's well worth doing anyway. And if you have occasionally there are serious disputes with credit reporting agencies where they won't, where there's a mix-up with somebody else and they won't correct them. And we have to suggest to you that you go to litigation and refer you to an attorney for that. And if so, you'll want to have a dispute in your record. The reports don't have to be perfect. The credit reporting agencies aren't held to that standard. Their investigation has to be reasonable. And you may end up with some situations where you still believe there are items that are wrong. You can't prove it for sure. They say that the items are right, and they apparently did conduct a reasonable reinvestigation. If that's the case, that's the situation. What you want to do is to help improve those items, or wait for them to drop off your report. And so let me just mention here the non-legal part of this that you may want to consider. And this is not something we do for you, it's something you need to do for yourself, but it can help you to understand what most affects your credit score and your credit worthiness to future creditors. The agency that provides the bulk of credit scores, something called Fair Isaac Company, that provides something called a FICO score. They say that 35% of that score is determined by your payment history on accounts. Timeliness, the delinquency of payments in the past, and accounts that are still delinquent. 30% is based on amount owed. That is, even if you have accounts that are not delinquent, that you're making the minimum payment, if you owe a lot of money, if you have credit limits on your credit cards of $60,000 and you owe $55,000 on them, that's going to diminish your credit score because it will appear that you're overextended. That's basically why that's such a high figure. These are the areas that you want to, in terms of your improving your credit score, your credit worthiness, focus on. Bringing things up to date, particularly the more recent accounts. I mean, if an account is 5 or 6 years old, delinquent, it's going to drop off and it's not going to be as important in the meantime as the more recent ones. Try to bring them up to date, work with your creditors, the credit card account companies, negotiate with them for payoffs, which may be less than the full amount. It's best if they say now that it's paid. It's best if you bring things up to date now, particularly more recent delinquent accounts. Limit the number of new efforts to get credit. One more thing about credit reports is that the credit reporting statutes and practices give you some protections against identity theft. Credit reports can show identity theft. Credit reports can affect because they will be pulled when somebody else seeks credit in your name. So they're a part of that process, and they can stop identity theft. The most effective means is a security freeze. It can be a problem for you because when you want credit in an instant, you want a new card when you're at the store because they're offering a deal, you have to get the freeze lifted before they'll give you the credit card, then you have to get it reimposed. In the past, that's cost you money at each step. But right now, you can get it up until June 30th because of their major lapse from Equifax and giving out and losing a bunch of information to hackers. You can get a security freeze from Equifax for their credit reports free until June 30th. You will be able to later this year, about 4 months I think, get free security freezes from all 3 of the main credit reporting agencies. It's part of the new banking law just signed. Helped out the banks mostly, but helped out consumers a bit. Fraud alerts, the other thing, if you've had anything that suggests you've been a victim of identity theft or other consumer fraud, you can request a fraud alert. Initial one will last 90 days. What that does, it doesn't hamper you entirely in getting credit or need to be lifted, but it does notify creditors of the past problem and may keep an identity thief from opening an account in your name. Okay, so that's credit reporting in brief. We're going to move on to credit card statements and the right you have to demand an investigation there of items on your credit card statement. Gasoline and, well, dating service. I put that on there because of my own experience a few years ago, in which my credit card statement came, and it had 20 or more one-month subscriptions to a dating service. Needless to say, my wife was not amused, and I had to take rather quick action to deal with it. My only suspicion here is that it was an identity theft designed to use my credit card to pull off a greater fraud, presumably some kind of a Lonely Hearts Club scheme. I don't know, where somebody else is going to get ripped off. In any case, acting quickly on these kinds of things is important anyway, because you have certain rights, but they're time limited. And we're going to talk about them right away. It's the Fair Credit Billing Act, which allows you to legally challenge items on your credit card report that are not accurate. Billing errors, as they call them. What's a billing error? Well, you ordered an item and you didn't get it. You didn't order the item and service at all. Or you ordered it, but the amount listed is wrong. Somebody else ordered it. Well, there's your identity theft, and they didn't have authority from you to do it. You got the item, you ordered the item, it came, but it's not what you ordered. Send it back, but it still shows up on your credit. Until you get it and it's the right item, it shouldn't be on your credit report and can be disputed. Incorrect items, rejected by you. Now, I would say this, that the billing error doesn't include that you got the item, but it doesn't turn out to be what you thought, or even what they promised if it's a matter of quality. They sent you the part to fix your dryer. It fits, but it's not up to the original parts, in your opinion. If it's what you ordered, you may still have a dispute with the seller, but it's probably not going to fly as a way to get that item off your credit card statement. If you didn't get credit for a payment, the amounts they're saying you owe aren't right, any error along those lines also is a billing error that you can dispute by this method. What's the way to do it? Okay, you should be dealing with the credit card company. I mean, you should also deal with the seller. I'm not saying that, who took that credit card, but you want to deal with the credit card company because that's where you got these rights, and it's a source of pressure on the seller to make things right, to give you what they're supposed to be giving you, because the credit card company is going to charge back against them if this falls under the billing error. You should do it in writing. Now, they all accept and really encourage to do this kind of thing over the phone, which is fine initially, but you should also send a writing. There'll be a billing act statement in your credit card statement every month. There'll be an address to send things to. Send them a note. I reported to you over the phone, this item circled on this copy of my report is wrong. I never got the goods. Why do you send it in writing? That's what triggers your rights under the law. They can accept the oral information, but you need to confirm. And you need to do it within 60 days. It has to be received within 60 days, so you want to do it earlier than that. after the first statement with a particular charge was sent to you. Sent to you. So not the day you got it. So you want to do this promptly. You want to report it to them. You want to send them something in writing confirming it. Keep a copy of it for yourself. This gives you legal rights, and it also puts pressure on the seller whose ability to follow through with this charge against you is drawn into question. What's in the letter? Well, of course, you can come to us and we'll work with you on this. Your legal service plan, give us a call. But what should be in that letter is an identification of the disputed item, the item circled, if you're using that method, or repeated in specific detail, if not. An explanation of what the problem is. And again, if there are any documents, for instance, if you sent back the goods that were purchased, you can include a receipt for the return shipment that shows that you sent it back because it was the wrong thing. You did not get what you ordered. What happens then? Well, the credit card company can't collect on this. Essentially has to remove it from your account until an investigation is completed. Can't charge interest for it. You can withhold payment. You're as it should be, as I say, basically charged back, removed from your account for the time being. It doesn't mean you can stop, not pay on the whole statement, but this item you can not pay on for the time being. Or if you have paid on it before you realize the problem, as long as you're within the 60-day period of the initial statement where it showed up, you should still be disputing it, and you still have the legal right, and they will still have to charge it back and give you credit for it if their investigation shows that you never did get the right stuff or you never did buy the item listed at all. Credit card company has to make a reasonable investigation. They have to repeat it within the next 2 billing cycles after receipt. It's every 30 days. It's maybe 60 days plus the period up to the next, beginning of the next billing cycle. So maybe even more than 60 days. And until it's completed, when it's completed, if they determine it's reasonable, it's going to be back on your credit, and it hasn't been paid, it's going to be back on your credit card statement. But in the meantime, and will have to be paid then. But in the meantime, it should not be reported on your credit report in an adverse fashion at all. So, your legal services plan can help with both credit reports and credit billing problems. Best to get to us timely, particularly on the credit billing problems. Always think, if you're having a problem with a product that you just bought, a service that you just bought, think credit report, think credit card statement. If you paid by credit card, you should always be thinking in terms of using your rights under the credit card law. And it's a reason to pay by credit card rather than debit card. You do not have the same federal rights under debit cards. Yes, there is a procedure for debit cards to correct errors in amounts that you have taken off directly out of your bank account using a debit card, and fraud against you, but not the kinds of rights that you have with a credit card against sellers who you've used a card with for correction of errors. Much more extensive under credit cards. We can help you assert your rights even if the 60-day period has passed, there may be things we can do, particularly directly with the other party to assert your rights, the seller, and certainly with credit reports and credit reporting agencies. So give us a call and use your plan. Do we have questions?
Fred, I'm not seeing any questions. Let's hold off and see if people will have some.
You want to describe how to put questions in here?
Well, if you do have a question, if you're on the webinar, there is a drop down, which you should see on my screen. It's on the right-hand side, and then you can type in your question, and then once we've received the question, it'll pop up on our screen, and then Fred can answer it.
Let me remind you that this is the first in what we expect to be a series of webinars. We're looking forward to having webinars on other topics of general interest, such as estate planning, deeds, and joint ownership of property, other issues that the plan can help you with, and that your understanding of can be key to proper handling of really typical legal problems that you may have. We're also going to upload an audio copy of this onto the plan's website, so if you learn something here, you can go back and listen to it again or recommend it to others.
Oh, and then one final reminder, Fred, is that for those who would like a copy of this presentation in a PDF format, a number of folks received them several hours before the webinar started, but if you did not receive it, feel free to email me, Peter Miles, and my email address is PETERMI, then the @ sign, UAWLSP, like Larry Sam Paul, .com, PETERMI @UAWLSP.com. And if you just say in the header of your email webinar, I'd be happy to get that sent out to you. And we do appreciate your time and attention to this webinar. We're still waiting on questions, so if you have any, please feel free to type them in. Not so much a question, but Keontae made a comment, and thank you, Keontae, for your comment.
Good.
Well, we're not seeing any questions, so we're going to log off. But again, we truly appreciate your time and attention to this inaugural planned webinar, and future webinars are anticipated and are in the works. And if you have a topic that you'd like to have a webinar on, please feel free to contact us. You've got my email, you've got our toll-free telephone number. We'd like your information, and we appreciate all of your time and attention today. Thank you very, very much.